Do you want to know something about the process handling APIs in Windows? Or do you want to know something about a current issue with Microsoft Access? If either of this is true, watch on. Hi, I'm Philip from codekabinett.com, and this is a video in the Windows API series, but it is somewhat atypical for that because I'm addressing a very current issue in Access. We are going to look at the issue right now, but before we look at a live replication of the problem, I want to draw your attention to the accessforever.org website. And it's featuring this current issue with this short article, and I really love the non-AI created header image with this really sweet Microsoft Access ghost. Access Forever is a website where a small group of volunteers, of which I am a part, is publishing, amongst other things, publishing information about current issues in Microsoft Access. So if you encounter an unexpected problem and it is replicable, you struggle with it, I recommend you visit accessforever.org and check if there is an article on the problem you are facing, because we are analyzing problems in depth. We are showing workarounds or describing workarounds there, but I want also to show you the issue in a live scenario. There are multiple scenarios that must be triggering this issue, and we don't understand most of them. But there is one that is very sure to replicate the problem. It is in Windows settings, in the ease of access, and we're talking about accessibility here, not Microsoft Access. In the ease of access settings, there is one option, use text cursor indicator, this one here. And if you turn that on, as I did here already, then you are very likely to see the problem in Microsoft Access. This would be an easy thing to solve. Just switch this setting off again and you will not suffer from the problem caused by this setting. But this problem is still happening in other situations, and it started about, I think, several months ago. I switched this on to trigger the problem, and now in Microsoft Access it's fairly simple. I need to open any form with a text box and type something into that text box. And if I now close Microsoft Access and move over to the task manager here, you see in the top level apps, in the active apps, there's no more Microsoft Access. But if I scroll down here in the background processes, here we are. This is the problem. There is still Microsoft Access running in the background, and some people reported that this instance will close eventually after a couple of minutes or so, but usually it stays there unless you explicitly kill it with end task in the task manager or you restart your computer. And this on its own wouldn't be as bad, but if I go to the database file in Windows Explorer, and that is exactly the database file I showed you a minute ago, and I now double click it, and you see nothing really happens, and that's not really, maybe I didn't click it properly. Double click it again. Okay, now we see the problem. Microsoft Access does not start, but it created this laccdb log file you see here, this one, and now whenever you try to open the database, you will get a message, this database is already opened by someone else and you can't get full access to the database. And so this is a problem. It can be very annoying to your users if you created an Access application for them and it's suffering from the problem, and your users want to run it again and they just see annoying error messages, your application is not working properly. It is not really doing harm, but it's incredibly annoying. So I am going to show you a workaround for this problem. But first, let's go over to Task Manager here and end this task. This will make the problem go away. If users do that manually, the problem will be solved for the moment. It will happen again once they open the database and the problem still exists and they close it again. The situation will repeat. So I'm now going to show you a very crude workaround, and I will also, as this is a video in the Windows API series, I will also talk a little about the process API functions in Microsoft, in the Microsoft Windows operating system. Here is the database again, and once again I open the form that is triggering the problem. I type something into the text box here, and we once again created the situation that Access will hang when I close it. But now I'm going to show you something else. Another form I created here, and it's called Terminator. And what the form says on its main label there is actually what it's doing. It will terminate Access forcefully. Let's look at the code behind the form. I already prepared a couple of API functions here, and let's start from the top. The first one is get current process, this one. And the next one is get current process ID. And that is something I want to talk about because I was confused quite a couple of times between what is the difference between these functions. And to really show that, I prepared a small presentation for you. The process ID is just a number. It is a unique number identifying a process on your computer. And that's all there is to it. On the other hand, the process handle is something different. It is a way to access a process if you want to manipulate the process or do something with it, like read memory that is allocated to the process, or set process properties like the process priority, or, as we are going to do it in a minute, if you want to terminate a process. This process handle is also associated with permissions. You can acquire a handle to a process just to view its information relatively easily, but you can usually only acquire more control over a process, more permissions, If you want to write to its memory or change its properties, then you need a higher level of permissions, and you either must target your own processes which are running in your current user account, or you must be a Windows administrator, or your application must run with administrator privileges to be able to do these more or less intrusive things with a process. And there can be multiple handles to the very same process from different other processes, different other programs. So the process handle is not really unique. And it's also possible that there's one handle that is basically pointing to one process and multiple child processes as well. But that is very exotic. I'm not going to talk about that in much more detail. Now back to our functions here. And that is the important difference here. The getCurrentProcess function will give you a handle to the process, while the getCurrentProcessID function will give you just the unique identifier, the numeric identifier of the process. So let's look at how I use them. There is a very simple method to get the current process handle. That is just the function I showed you to retrieve the process. So we've got a process handle declared here. It's a long pointer because handles are of different size on a 32-bit and 64-bit platform, and with a long pointer data type you can accommodate both. So we acquire this process handle, and then we just call the terminate process API function, which is also defined up here. This is it, terminate process. It's defined in the kernel 32 DLL, and it wants an handle to a process, because as I said previously, if you want to really do something with a process, you need a handle to it. We can also set an exit code, but that's of minor interest in this context. And whenever you acquired a handle, you are also supposed to close that handle once you don't need it anymore. And close handle is another function from the kernel 32 library. And so the process here, the control flow is basically I acquire the process handle, then I terminate the process, supplying the process handle that I just acquired, and then I close the handle just out of principle, basically, because if I kill the process with terminate process, it's pretty much irrelevant if the process that is just terminated still has a handle to itself when it's terminated. So this close handle will probably not be even executed, but I include it just to show you how you would usually deal with a handle once you don't need it any longer. So I could run this because getCurrentProcess gives me the handle to the current process, but I want to show you how you can work when you are not really dealing with the current process but with a different process. So I will comment that out and comment in these two other functions. I now call the getProcessID function here, and with the ID bit in the function name, and that will give me a process ID. And it's also possible to use other functions like enumerate process, and so that will all give you a handle to processes. And get current process obviously gives me the handle for our access process here, but if you use enumerate process to basically get all processes that are currently running on your computer and you pick one, then you would also get a process ID. You can also get a process ID from a thread or from an open window. So it's fairly easy to acquire a process ID if you know the application name or the title bar. There are different approaches. I'm not going to show them in detail, but it's fairly easy to get such a process ID. But to get a handle to a process that is not the process you are running in, you are going to need the open process function here, which I call, and you need to specify which permission or which privileges you want for the process. And I just want to terminate the process, so I tell the open process function, yeah, I need a handle with the permission to close the process. This false is just for inheriting. It just says if I use this handle to create child processes, should they inherit the handle? That's totally out of scope here. And the important bit is that I pass in this process ID into the function here to tell Windows to which process I want to achieve a handle. And this would also be necessary if you try to get control over another process. What I also did here, I added this small if not close without terminate. That's just a helper function for me, that I can close this form without terminating access. If I open this form and close access in the close event of the form that I just showed you, I will run the API code to terminate access. And I just click here to make access close. And here's a friendly reminder, I will address that in a minute. And now access will close. And if we go to the task manager, so here we are in the task manager. I will scroll slowly through the list. It's sorted by a name, so I can zoom in. Microsoft Access would have to be here, sorted by its name, and it's not there. So this forceful termination of access solved the problem we were dealing with. How is this a workaround for the access hanging on close problem? You can take my form here and integrate it into your own database, or you build something very similar from scratch. It doesn't necessarily need to be a form, but a form is very convenient because you can kind of catch the close event of the form to run this code. And if you integrate this form or a similar one into your database, you use it either as a startup form or you use other means to open this form as soon as a user opens your database. But you open it invisible in the background. The user will never see this form. The user can work in your application as he usually does. There's no difference whatsoever until the user wants to close the database. And he clicks on the X in the upper right corner, or he clicks on a close button that you design. Doesn't really matter. If you close access, all forms in the database will be closed. And also the form that terminates access. And then the Windows API termination code runs and forcefully terminates access instead of letting it try to terminate normally, which does not really work in these situations when this bug shows. That's the suggested workaround. So, is this a good workaround? Not really. Not really. Just to be very, very clear about this workaround. Microsoft Access, poor little Access, is really busy trying to close your precious database, and somewhere on the way it's going to encounter a problem that's preventing it from closing the database cleanly. But it's trying its best. And if you use my workaround, you then take a really big hammer and smash poor little Access to pieces. And of course, this can cause damage to your database. It's rather unlikely that it will do so if you do it properly. But you must be aware it's not a good workaround, it's the lesser of two evils. And it's up to you really to decide that, if this workaround is the lesser evil or if Microsoft Access hanging is the lesser evil. But if you use this workaround to terminate access forcefully, you should take really good care that you close all your own forms, open queries like open record sets and any other stuff that needs some proper cleanup when closing. That should be done first, and you as a developer should make sure your database closes all these objects, and only then you get out the big hammer with process terminate and kill off the process. So we are done here for today. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.